corporation. So I got to tell you, as a 22-year-old, saving and investing was the furthest thing from my mind. Spending and having a great time was on the top of my list of things that I wanted to do on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis. I didn't grow up with money. And when I had it, I usually spent it. I mean, that was my whole life was like that. I was taught that if you wanted something, you save for it so you could buy it. But I never got, and really, my father was trying to teach me other lessons, but I wasn't listening back then. When as a 22-year-old district, I turned 23 December 6th of that year, same year I got promoted. So I bought myself a Toyota MR2, which if you don't know what that is, because they don't make them anymore, that was a little sports car, two-seater. The engine, it was a mid-engine car, so the engine would be behind the seats, okay? And T-tops, so that could take the roof off. So that was my payments, by the way, I'm sorry, that was my second years at the end, but my payments was still a birthday gift to me. My payments were $500 a month for that car. I already, and because that car was so bad in the snow, and I lived in the Northeast, I couldn't get to the office. So I decided, well, I love the car, so I'm going to keep that. I'm going to buy a Pathfinder as well, a Nissan Pathfinder. And I didn't put anything down on either of these vehicles, by the way. So I borrowed it all. So I had a $500 payment for the MR2. I had a $350 payment for the Nissan Pathfinder so that I could get to work in the snow. $850 in payments for my car. My rent was less than that. And my friends had a few suggest. They had all kinds of terms for somebody like me that they used to call me that I won't go into. But anyway, not the smartest at financial decisions at that part of my life, to say the least. Eventually, though, I got rid of those cars. And instead, I bought a Hummer H2, which was a $65,000 vehicle. I had just gotten a $60,000 super bonus. I figured, what else am I going to do with it, right? Other than buy this vehicle. At the time, there was a tax loophole that if your vehicle weighed more than 2 tons, which the H2 does, that you could use it as a tax write-off if you were, it was really meant for farmers, okay? So it's meant for farmers, but if you're an independent contractor of any kind, you could still use the tax loophole. So I wasn't being totally boneheaded at that point. I was able to use it as a tax deduction. So after a couple of 400K sales years with Vector, I finally started to get smart. I started taking money and investing much more seriously. I read several books, and back then cassette tapes and CDs on investing and building wealth. Most people, I learned, put it off. They put off wealth building, after I graduate college, after I get married, after I get a house, after I have kids, after the kids graduate college. They just keep putting it off, and that becomes a trend for most people in both countries. I was amazed at how my new commitment to understanding money allowed me to work harder and smarter. I started building wealth just $100 at a time. I was funding my Roth IRA. I learned what a SEP was, which I'll talk about in a little bit here, and I started funding that. Vector, I learned how to program through American funds, which at the time was Smith Barney. Now I think it's Morgan Stanley, but where will actually save money for you each week from your commissions, and at the end of the month, it'll get sent to Morgan Stanley and invested into one of the American funds of your choosing, a mutual fund, right? So I started to do that. And it was just a little bit here and a little bit there, but all that adds up so fast. It gets really exciting. As I started thinking bigger about investing, I was forced to think bigger about recruiting, right? So the next thing, my sales summers went from 300K, which was my best summer as a DM, to the next summer over $600,000, to the next summer $825,000 for the summer, to the next summer $944,000, and then the next summer my first and one of the first $1 million summers in company history. I started handing my super bonuses directly over to my financial advisor because I just didn't need the money. I was out of debt at that point, no school loans, nothing. All right, married. And I had my first kid. I won a silver cup when I got married, the year I got married, and I won my second. That was my first silver cup, and then my second silver cup the year I had my first child, Jack, who is now 18, and sold Cutco this summer. We could talk about that in a little bit. Since those days, I also learned that you're not what you drive. And so one of the things I did was I got rid of the H2, which my wife hated, mostly because when people would drive by us, they would either give us the finger or they would go like this. I don't know what this means, but you could probably figure it out, okay? So those are the two symbols that we would get as we drove by in the H2. So we got rid of that. I bought a Jeep Wrangler and a soccer mom minivan, all within 6 days. Okay, so that was that became more our style. I drove that Jeep Wrangler, by the way, for 10 years until Vector finally came out with a new program where they insisted that I drive something nicer than a 10-year-old Jeep Wrangler. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker, and I'm glad I did. I can tell you that I also bought my first investment property back then in San Antonio, Texas. So we built a house right near the University of Texas in San Antonio, rented it out to grad students. By the way, I have never seen the house, never seen it. I mean, I've seen pictures of it, and I knew what it was going to look like when they were building it because I saw models of it, but I never actually physically saw this investment property. You know, as I read more and still continue to listen to audiobooks in my car, it keeps me focused on hitting my goals. And it gives me an opportunity to help others more and more. I love gobbling up this new material that comes out on finances. The exciting thing with Vector is the fact that they keep finding new ways to help their district managers become wealthy. You know, I mean, you've heard this from other DVMs, but they didn't have campaign bonus when I was a district manager. They didn't have a monthly PACE bonus at $1,000. They didn't have a BMW program at $500 a month. They had a super bonus program. Is a little bit different back then, but now it's automatic every 3 years. Danny Lewis, as a district manager, by the way, has earned 5 $30,000 super bonuses. Think about that for a minute. That is pretty fired up. They extend new business. When I was a newer manager, it was 15K. Yeah, 15K. Now it's 30K, still counts as new business. That's not only great for the district manager, it's also great for your entire staff, right? As they all get paid off of new business as well. E-commerce checks or commissions that come once a month. New opportunities still coming, by the way, as we continue to grow the business. It truly is the unlimited opportunity. We can never forget that. But let's talk about being a 1099 for a minute. We're all 1099s for the most part, right? All the books that I've read, starting your own business is still the fastest way to wealth. It's the hardest too, right? It's the hardest, but it's also the most rewarding. So it's the fastest, it's the hardest, but it's also the most rewarding. So let's take a look at some typical household incomes here. What I did was I grabbed some budgets. I did a little research on what exactly does a household make. So the first one that I'm going to show you here, the first one, there we go. The first one, that's not really a household budget. It's more like one person. It's kind of like I live in an apartment budget, right? So they make $46,000 per year, probably a pretty common income for somebody right out of college these days. This is not a brand new screen here, but it's hard to find these on even Google Images. Anyway, so their take-home pay, $46,000 annually. Monthly gross pay was $3,800 after taxes. They were at $2,896 was take-home pay, their net pay, right? So they had $1,250 for rent. Some of you could relate to that. I'm not going to go through all the individual expenses. They were brown bagging their lunch, okay? So that was something that they felt that they needed to do, was brown bag the old luncharoony there. And hold on one second here. Here we go. Just going to grab a little spotlight. And then as you go down, you can see their total expenses were about $100 less than their net pay. Okay, so there you go. So that's a $46,000 income. Let's take a look at another budget. This is more the average, what an average household would make. The median household income in Canada is $60,000. It's a little bit higher in the United States, but this is the median household. So if we're looking at just kind of a household that makes $60,000 per year, their annual wages are $60,000. Their monthly gross pay is $5,000. They have taxes. They are putting away in their 401k, so that's great. That makes their net pay $3,400. But then they've got rent and gas. That's not gas for the car. That's probably gas for the apartment or wherever they live. Electric, phone, etc. And then you just scroll down: groceries, vacation money that they put away, monthly haircuts, $25 for haircuts. Okay, so not the $700,000 I've heard others pay for haircuts in a year, but 25, it sounds more reasonable for a month. Okay. Total expenses of $3,400, right? So again, they had healthcare taken care of, I guess, by the company they work for. I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't see it on here though, and you can see what their final take home was after that, not so much left over. Let's take a look at how about somebody who makes 100 grand and has 2 kids, okay? So they're pulling in 100 grand, they're putting 12K in their 401k. They do have their tax rate, okay, effective tax rate is 21%. Their monthly net income is $5,700, right? So that's what their take-home pay is. They do have a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, all right? So anyway, they have a $350,000 home. Their mortgage payment is over $2,000 plus their real estate taxes. So it's actually $2,500 a month, $24.99. Okay, and then you can go down through and see all the things that they're spending money on. They budgeted money for clothes, $150. They budgeted $500 a month for entertainment. Must be nice to be them. They're charitable. That's great. They have a pet. That costs money. Dry cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. And what you'll see at the bottom is that they're spending more than they are getting. They're spending $6,800, but they're only bringing home $5,700. And that would make them normal. That would make them like most people. That would make them like most people. Think about that for a minute. That would make them like most people. You know, in the Millionaire Next Door, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, affluent people in the book, it's a great book, by the way, it's timeless. Affluent people, by the way, the book is about, they studied the average millionaire, and most millionaires are self-made. They didn't inherit it. But one of the things that they do have in common is affluent people typically follow a lifestyle conducive to accumulating money. A couple of things they do. Number one, they live below their means. They don't do what you see in the $100,000 estimated budget household income here, where they spend more than they bring in. Number two, they believe that financial independence is more important than displaying high social status. They don't care to drive the nicest car, live in the biggest home, and all those things. Not the real average millionaire. They also choose, number three, they said they choose the right occupation. They choose the right occupation. Success Magazine says that occupation is sales. 70% of Fortune 500 executives either started in sales or are currently in sales. Think about that for just a moment. Income plus your habits equals your lifestyle in retirement. Your income plus your habits equals your lifestyle in retirement. You don't have to have a big income. You do have to live below your means, which are your habits. So it's really the combination of both equals your lifestyle later on. You know, I think about the lifestyles of some of the people that I've met through Vector that were district managers. Some of them went on to become division managers. Some of them are new district managers, and it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. Kyle Preeman and I were talking. Now, he's currently a division manager, but when he was a district manager, he had $47,000 in profit just for the month of January 2006. Just for that month. That was his profit for the month of January in 2006. And he was able, in that 1 month profit, use that to buy his first house. And in 2008, his 1099 as a district manager was $229,000. That's pretty exciting. He was already in the home, right? Matt Angstad, as a district manager in his first 3 years, invested $60,000. But the reason why I like to bring Matt up, the reason why this is significant, okay, is because he was only doing $400,000 to $500,000 per year. So many times we think we've got to be doing $750,000 to $1 million to sock money away, but Matt did it just selling $400,000 to $500,000 a year, and socked away $60,000 in his first 3 years, right? But he actually wrote out a budget every month, stuck to it, and made sure he was investing his money and taking advantage of compounding interest. Ben Finch, brand new district manager. He's on this Zoom right now. This summer, first summer as a district manager, $300K summer, had $35,000 in withholdings by the end of this summer, plus $15,000 in the bank, by the way. Not bad for your first $300K summer. Yes, we did remove a large chunk of that and invest it, okay? But I think it's exciting to be able to take a campaign, save a bunch of money, out of sight, out of mind, and then figure out what to do 4 months later, right? Kristen Ali, she's also on this call right now, on the Zoom right now. She's in her first full year as a district manager. We promoted her last year at the November winter kickoff conference that kicks off our winter break program, our January program. So really got started in December. In less than a year, she has over $150,000 saved in her first full year. She's at about $850,000 for the year. What a difference a year can make in your life. You know, what is a district manager's job? In my opinion, it's to maximize his or her territory by recruiting, training, developing, and deploying other branch managers and district managers. That's a big part of it. Part of it is certainly your own territory, your own office, but also recruiting, training, developing, and deploying successful branch and district managers. How does this happen? Act as if your job is to fill your region. Act as if your job is to fill your region. Speak to the best people weekly, monthly. This is important. Like if you haven't been reaching out to other top district managers, they're happy to share. They want to tell you what they're doing, right? They're happy to share that information with you. But if you're not reaching out on social media or via text or via email, just to set up a time to capture 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes of their time, you're doing yourself a disservice. Reach out to top people. If you are a top person, reach out to other top people. You can continue to improve and get better, and it's lonely to run the business by yourself on Zoom. It's a lot of fun to be reaching out to top people and running it together. Heck, you could have a Zoom meeting, or you could do a phone call. If you're a little zoomed out, that's okay. Master the fundamentals of our business. Master the fundamentals of our business. One good campaign really can change where you are. I love Drew's talk earlier today because what he did was he helped you figure out, well, what are the fundamentals of this business that I need to master? That's it. You have the answers. Watch that video again, right? That, by the way, one good campaign really can change where you are. Think about that for a moment, that statement. In our business, one good campaign really can change where you are. Can you commit to annihilate the next 4 or 5 months? That's a freaking blessing. You also have to know that how you're thinking about your year can impact your finances positively or negative. And I would go so far as to say that how you're thinking about your finances can impact your year positively or negatively. I want to share a few things with you now that really, I think, made a difference in my life and hopefully will in yours. I've invested a ton of energy to get good at money. So I want to start at the beginning. I also want to say I recognize that everybody on this Zoom is in a different place. But no matter where you are financially, I have something for everybody on this Zoom. I can promise you that. The number one tip, though, that I keep reading from every financial guru and every wealthy person, number one tip to building wealth is to stay out of debt. To stay out of debt. Being in debt is like compound interest in reversed, right? Because you're paying a percentage on your debt. And if it's credit card debt, it's a very high percentage. I realized if it's student loans, it's a much lower percentage. And if it's a mortgage, it's an even lower percentage. But you're still, it's like compounding interest in reverse. If you can't pay cash without negotiating in your mind whether or not you can afford it, you can't afford it. Don't fall into this keeping up with the Joneses trap, okay? You know, Trent mentioned I had written a couple books. I do donate the money to charity. Deciding to Thrive was the second book. Chapters 8 and 9 are kind of your financial roadmap, okay? And one of the things that I mentioned in the book is that spending more than you earn and making up the difference on credit cards gives you a negative inner voice that makes it tougher to focus on business and on family. You know, when you think about how our society views money, just think about debt for a minute and how our society views debt. Think about the national debt, okay? So I'm talking about in the United States here. We have this gigantic national debt of $23 trillion, no balanced budget. What message does that send to people that are in the country that they live in about debt? I also think when I think about debt and how people kind of get where they get, sometimes I think parent debt can actually have something to do with it, or even the way their parents raised them. Some parents don't like to talk about finances very much and don't want to talk to their kids about it. I think my parents were like that. But I think my dad was trying. I didn't know that my dad was actually really good at money. He now is retired. He's living a great life. He's making more in retirement than before retirement. He has investment properties. You know, he's enjoying. He's really. But when I was younger, I always thought he was cheap. Some people say their parents are tightwads, but I didn't realize that he was saving, investing for the future. I just did not make the connection, even though he was trying to teach it to me. I kind of rebelled against it, and I think that happens to a lot of people. Parents also have good advice, like work hard, earn money, and then you can spend it. Well, that's kind of all I heard, okay? I missed the save, for your retirement. Some of you have probably heard of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in it, Robert T. Kiyosaki says that lesson 1, the poor and middle class work for money, the rich have money work for them. The book is about his poor dad, which was his natural father, and his rich dad, which was his best friend's father, and the lessons that he was learning from each as he was growing up. He said, my poor dad, who was highly educated, taught his son, study hard, get good grades so that you can find a safe, secure job with a big company and make sure it has excellent benefits. Has anyone ever heard that before? All right. His rich dad, his best friend's dad, taught him, learn how money works so that you can make money work for you. Learn how money works so that you can make money work for you. You know, when you think about student debt, not only the student loan debt, but did you know that the average college student has $2,700 in credit card debt while they're still in college? Like, you don't even have a job and they're willing to give you credit cards, assuming that you're going to have to pay it off over time and they're going to make a lot more money off of you because of that, right? 10% of college students graduate and they have more than $7,000 in credit card debt while they're still in college, more than $7,000 before they even graduate, more than $7,000 in credit card debt. So you know they're going to have to pay it off in time, right? Let's say the credit card is charging 20%. And by the way, some charge 25, 28, but let's just use 20%. Making the minimum payment, which is what most students end up doing, it's going to take them 30, 40 years at the minimum payment and cost them over $20,000 to pay off their $7,000 credit card debt. Does that make sense to you financially? It doesn't to me. It doesn't to me. The way debt works is actually the same way savings works. Remember I talked earlier about how I just started saving $100 here and $100 there, right? And a little bit over time. And at the end of the year, it's like, wow, look at how much I saved. Well, debt unfortunately works the same way. It's not that we go out and get in debt all at once, except for maybe student loans or a mortgage, but credit card debt is just usually a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. But at the end of the year, at the end of the month, it's like, how did I spend all that money? How did I spend all that money? Here's another scary statement for you. Fact, 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. How much do you have saved in your savings account? Some of you are in the top 15% in the country with money saved. That's pretty fired up. That's pretty fired up. But the other 69%, that's not so fired up. Even I would go so far as to say the other 85%, that's not so fired up. That's not so fired up. Let me ask you this question. How much would you like to have invested when you retire and at what age? I want you to write it down or put it in the chat if you want to share it. How much do you want to have invested and at what age? Take a minute. Think about it. Jot it down. Maybe you've never thought about it. Maybe you already have that number. I'm going to help you get there. Let's talk about investing in stocks for a minute, okay? Sometimes people are afraid to put their money in the stock market because there's a risk. And I think that is a very good fear if you're in your 80s. But at your age, there's virtually no risk in stocks or mutual funds, okay? It's going to go up, it's going to go down. But even if you invested in 2009 and lost it all in 2008 or got cut in half, they jokingly said everyone's 401k became a 201k, right? They all got it. If you didn't touch it, it all came back. And then some, by the way. As a matter of fact, if you took it out in frustration and tried to put it back and time it, and you lost big time. You lost a huge chunk of your retirement. So at your age, there's virtually no risk in stocks or mutual funds. What is risk? In my opinion, having a single source of income is risky. That's the most risk. Employees are at risk. They have a single source of income. But think about our managers for a minute. And by the way, I've had so many friends lose their job or lose whatever because of this pandemic, they had to get laid off. And I know a lot of companies did the right thing. Cutco is one company that really did the right thing with their employees. Never forget that, okay? But what about our managers? They have reps that sell Cutco to hundreds and hundreds of customers. In other words, they have hundreds and hundreds of sources of income. Jack, my son, sold Cutco this summer, turned 18 in March. And just as it was all happening, March 15th, it all hits the fan, right? Pandemic emergency here. And we were going to wait until after track ended for him to start selling Cutco. Well, track ended in March. I still wanted them to get through most of school, so we held off until I said, first weekend of summer, that's when you start. Now, as I'm saying that to him, in the back of my mind, knowing we were switching 100% to online, I was freaking out. I'm like, what did I just commit my 18-year-old to, right? But then I thought, how can I possibly ask hundreds of 18-year-olds in two divisions, thousands of 18-year-olds in two divisions to do this job and not have my son do it and do it well? That was certainly incentive enough to make sure that we made the virtual program work for me. I don't know about you, right? But I had blood on the line here, right? So in May, he started. He was still in school, so his parents were kind of strict. They only let him do 2 demos per week during the school week, okay? But even with those restrictions, he still got to a 6K fast start. My niece started selling Cutco as well, Olivia, and she also had a 6K fast start while going to school. So it's pretty exciting. The end of the summer, Jack finished #1 rep in our office, #3 in our division, just shy of scholarship level. He's over $40,000 in sales, sold $2,700 this weekend, did his first 2 in-home demos this weekend with a mask, okay, with close friends, family. Listen, it was scary times, right? What was cool, though, is every demo he did was done in my house. That was not an experience that I was expecting, to actually have him, ask for advice, sometimes mid-demo. Or to be able to see all these people that I knew that he was doing demos for. Some were recommended to him by others, but if I knew them, he would have me pop in and say hello. That was kind of a neat experience. But I learned a lot about virtual demos because they were all done at my home and we got to talk about them. I was tried to be a really good vector dad. I didn't bring it up. I let him bring it up, okay? And as he brought it up, then I would talk about it, but I never brought it up first. Hundreds of sources of income, that's what you have. Hey, you've heard the saying, pay yourself first. Pay yourself first. At least 15% of every commission check, you should pay yourself first. If you want to be wealthy, it's 30%. I mean, if you want to be wealthy fast, if you could save 30% of every commission you ever got, you'd be wealthy very quickly. 15% will get you there. And by the way, if you're not in a position to do that because you are going to work on that debt thing first, start with 3%. Like, start with a lower number. And then can you raise it by 1% every campaign until you get up to 15, right? The earlier you start, the bigger your nest egg. This assumes a 10% annual rate of return. I know some of you have seen this chart in the Northeast region before. I know it was at a divisional event recently in New Jersey. If you just invested 5% per day, think about this for a minute. Let's take a look at that. $5 per day, not percent. $5 per day. That's $150 per month. How many of you think you could scrape together $150 per month right now? Right? You probably blew $150 in September already and couldn't even tell me what you blew it on, right? Admit it, okay? So that's okay, by the way. That makes you human. That makes you normal, right? But what we're trying to do is to not be so normal all the time. I want you to be a little weird, okay? Be a little weird here. So $150 a month, in 10 years, you'd save $30,000. Think about what the average American has saved. 69% have less than $1,000. In 10 years, you'd be a $30,000 heir, right? Well, what about in 20 years? What about in 50 years? 50 years from now, if you're 25, that's what, 75? You'd have $2.5 million. That's pretty fired up. That sounds like a nice chunk of change. That's just $150 per month, but some of you aren't even starting there. You need to start there. What about $300 per month? What about just your PACE bonus? And you keep 100 and put the other 900 away. Just that, just your PACE bonus. Think about that, 30 bucks a day. Some of you spent more than that going out 3 times that, right, in one night, okay? So 900 bucks, in 20 years, you'd have $683,000. That's you're going to be feeling pretty good in your 40s, right? In your 50s, though, you're done. You're just totally done. And all you did was take $900 of your PACE bonus and invest it. What if you could get it up to $1,500 a year? You're going to be a millionaire in 20 years. Just with that. $1,500 a month, I mean. $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month, I think, is, what, $18,000 a year? How about just invest your campaign bonuses 3 times a year? Just do that. And you're going to be a millionaire in 20 years or less. Probably 15 if you actually maxed out campaign bonus. What if you did PACE and campaign bonus? You get my point, okay? What are you waiting for? In 50 years, how would you like to have $25 million? You know what you could do with $25 million? Anything you want. Anything you want. I think that's pretty exciting. But you got to start now. The earlier you start, the more important. It's because of compounding interest. What's compounding interest? You know what it is, right? If you don't know what it is, here's what it is. It's when you invest money into mutual funds, and we'll get to that in a little bit. A lot of companies pay out dividends, right? So when they pay out these dividends, hey, you own a certain number of shares, and we're going to pay a dividend to all our shareholders. So we're going to give you whatever, $1 for every share you own. Okay, well, when you have a mutual fund, that means you and a couple thousand other people have mutually agreed to put your money into these stocks. And that's run by a fund manager, so you don't even have to pick it out. They'll pick out the stocks for you. They'll pay these companies pay these big dividends. So since you've mutually agreed to own all these shares, they're paying all of you the dividends, and then it's split amongst all of you. and it's reinvested back into the same mutual fund. So you get more shares automatically without doing anything. This is compounding interest. And now you're earning interest on your interest. And as that happens after 20 years, you're earning interest on interest on interest on interest, and do that 20, say that 20 more times. Okay, you get it? That's compounding interest. That's why this, you got to start now. Okay, you can't put this off. Start now. Learn. Here's another thing you should do if you want to start now and get good at money. I want to recommend an exercise. Okay, for the next 30 days, I want you to write down every penny you spent. Keep it in a little notebook. Just jot down, or maybe you make a spreadsheet or something you can keep with you. Like you buy a gumball, write it down. Sometimes you won't buy the gumball because you don't feel like writing it down, by the way. So this actually could have that effect. Maybe I'll skip Starbucks. I don't feel like writing it in my journal, but just do it for 30 days. Find out how much you spent. Are you spending more than you're bringing in? Do you even know what your monthly expenditures are? Is there somewhere you could be saving money? Okay. Some of you could probably save on cell phone by making a phone call to your phone company, on cable by making a phone call to your cable company. Okay, so where can you save? Where can you cut back a little bit? And let's get this investment going. Let's get this going. Your 65-year-old self, well, heck, your 50-year-old self is going to thank you. Your 40-year-old self is going to bow down in praise, right? Let's talk about how do we set up our accounts? All right, John, I want to get on the right track here. How exactly do I set up my accounts here? Okay, so, well, I'm going to tell you. This is what I call Wasserman's Money Management 101. Okay, so it starts with the ACH you get, the money that comes in from Vector in this case, that goes into your business checking. Now, I personally have a business checking with the same bank that I have a personal checking, but it is actually a business checking. So I literally have to write myself a check. They won't allow me to transfer it into my personal checking. Not all banks do that, but I'm with a credit union. That's their rules. A lot of banks do have that as a rule, okay? But I deposit it with my phone, so it's not a big deal. You could do a personal checking and another personal checking and just call that one your business checking, but if you get incorporated, you really should have a separate business checking. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, from your business checking or whatever you're calling it, you're gonna put money into your personal checking. That money is gonna take care of your personal expenses and your personal savings. And your personal savings is how you're gonna fund your Roth IRA, other investments, your personal emergency fund, okay? And also, if you're saving up for a home, you can have a separate account. So in my personal bank account, it allows me to have multiple savings accounts. And for me, online, it allows me to name them. So we have one for our kids' education that's called education. If I was saving up for a home, it would say buy a home, okay, or whatever. And I could put money into a holiday fund, or I mean, you can name them whatever you want. You can have these different, so I can kind of move money into these different accounts just online, which I think is a cool way to do it. Okay, you may not be able to name yours like I can. Most banks, I think, are doing that these days, but if you can't, you can kind of label it in a notebook so you don't forget, okay? From my business checking, I pay all my business expenses and myself. Pay all my business expenses, and I have a business. I do have an American Express card. And I know some of you love Dave Ramsey. I do too. I teach him every month. I love it. Read his books. I'm on the program for the most part with a few twists. I do have a business credit card. I don't have a personal credit card, but I do have a credit card for my business so I can pay for things that I know are tax write-offs. Like I just bought, if I were buying trophies, I would pay for that. If I buy a lot of stuff that has our divisional logo on it, okay, so pins or whatever. So I pay for that on my business Amex. And then I just, at the end of the month, I move the money. As a matter of fact, I'm a little more anal. I kind of move the money weekly. I like to pay the credit card off almost weekly, right? So, but I still collect the points, and that's how I do it. You don't have to do it that way. That's how I do it. I do have a business savings. So let me talk about the personal savings and business savings. The business savings, I have a month worth of office expenses, or in my case, divisional expenses, just sitting there just in case. I don't know if you have to have a 3-month business savings emergency fund, but you certainly should have at least 1 month saved. So if you have a few off weeks, you're not worried about rent and all that other kind of stuff, okay? Now, your stomach may be such that you need 3 months in business savings to feel good. Well, that's fine. Then you do that, okay? It's your money. In my personal savings, that emergency fund is definitely a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, okay? So 3 months, if that's what, you take your monthly expenses, if you do that exercise I mentioned for the next 30 days where you write down everything, then you could say that times, it's really not even that times 3 for 3 months, because you wouldn't have some of those expenses if something happened to you, like you lost your job or whatever, you're in between jobs or whatever the case. But you think about this pandemic, the ones who had the best financial situations were the ones who had an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. The ones who didn't have that and then lost their business or lost their job or couldn't go to run the restaurant that they own, they really had a tough time. And I really feel for them, because I know that 69% of people have less than $1,000 saved. I get that. I get that. I never want to be part of that group. I know that's where the majority of people are. They're part of that group. That 85% has less than 10,000 saved. That's not a club I want to be in. So anyway, I think that's really important. I think that's really important. Okay. Let me talk about something more fun. All right, John, I had a pretty good summer, or I'm about to have a great fall, or I'm getting a bonus soon, or whatever. I promoted the DM, so I'm going to get another 5K in November. Where do I invest $5,000, or where do I invest $10,000? And by the way, if you have $100,000, just multiply all this by that number. Okay, you get the point. First thing you do with your money, the first thing you have to do, obviously you're attacking loans. I'm not against saving while attacking loans. Like I understand the get all the debt gone and then save. Okay, I understand the philosophy behind it. I understand the wins. I think paying off small debts first is a great way to get a good win. Okay, I think you should do that while you're saving. And I mentioned earlier, just save 3% of your commissions each week if that's where you need to start while you're attacking that debt. But do save something, okay? Maybe it's a little bit more, all right? Maybe it's 15% if you're at that level. Maybe it's 30% if you're at that level, okay? Either way. But where do I invest it? What do I do? Well, the first thing you do is you start putting money away into emergency fund. You don't have to get like one lump sum and put it all into an emergency fund. You can start at $100 a month and just build up your emergency fund while you're tackling your other expenses and debts, okay? Once you have your emergency fund where you're comfortable, then the next thing to do is to put your money into a Roth IRA. Now, the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, you can put up to $6,000 in either one or the other. A traditional IRA, you could write off the $6,000. That's why people do it. The problem is that it doesn't grow tax-free. It will grow into retirement, and then when you take it out, you'll have to pay taxes on the money in retirement. A Roth IRA, though, you put the $6,000 in, it does not reduce your tax burden. However, it grows tax-free. So that's the preferred choice. That's where I would recommend any young budding investor start. Okay. Because when you take it out, you're not going to have to pay any taxes on that income. And chances are at that stage, where you are right now and the stage you're going to be in retirement, you're probably going to be at a higher tax bracket in retirement than you were in your 20s. So that's why people would recommend a Roth IRA. Okay. That might change when you're in your 50s, but certainly for now, that's the way it works. Okay. All right. By the way, if your family, sometimes I get asked, okay, well, I have some money, I want to invest it. And I don't really understand how do I set up a Roth IRA? Like, what do I do, John? Like, just spell it out for me. Tell me what to do. Spell it out for you. Here's what you need to do. Write this down. If your family is a financial advisor, set up a meeting with them. Set up a phone call. If they do not, if you don't have, that's okay. If they don't have a financial advisor, no big deal. Call your bank, whatever bank you have. Ask if they have a fiduciary. All banks do. A fiduciary is a financial advisor, but because they have the label fiduciary, a fiduciary must act in your best interest, must act in the best interest of their clients. Now, I'm not saying financial advisors don't do that. Of course, financial advisors are going to look out for you and are going to care about you, but sometimes the company they work for kind of pushes certain mutual funds because they're getting a little bit better kickback or whatever the case may be. And although you're going to benefit, you may not benefit as much as these other mutual funds over here. But a fiduciary, they have to give you the best for what you're trying to, what your goals are. They have to do and operate in your best interest. So my son, Jack, who sold $40,000 this summer, amassed quite a bit of money. One of his, so one of the things that we make our kids pay for stuff. Okay. I could, some of his friends got fancy cars. Well, we bought a car with him. We split it 50-50. Okay. Wasn't super fancy, but it got them from point A to point B. This is how we chose to raise our kids. When it comes to their education, well, before we had kids, we're like, we're not paying for their education. Nobody paid for ours. We had to pay for our own, right? But the costs have gotten so ridiculous that we're like, all right, we'll split it with them. So we're splitting it with them. And so his goal, one of his About Me, on his About Me page, talks about wanting to graduate college debt free, knowing that he's got to pay for half of it. He made enough to save for his first year of college, which is pretty exciting. And so that was pretty cool. Now this first semester he's at home, so he didn't have to pay his half. We just paid it. So that was kind of our, hey, you worked real hard. This is how we're going to We're not going to split this first semester with you. We're going to take care of it. But anyway, I think that's pretty cool. What's my point? My point is that he wanted to open up a Roth IRA because he's heard me talk about this stuff for so long, right? So he said, how do I do it? And he's not ready for the financial advisors that I use yet financially. So I said, call the bank, because we have the same bank. And I already knew they had a fiduciary. And ask if they have a fiduciary. And I said everything I said to you, I said to him. He's 18 years old. He set it all up himself. He called the bank. He got the fiduciary. He set up an appointment. He said, this is what I want to do. He did show me the paperwork just so I could take a peek at it, but he didn't have to. I mean, he could have handled it. It was pretty easy. We talked a little bit about the funds he was going to choose to put it in for his Roth IRA, because a Roth IRA is just the name of a savings account. You understand? It's just, so one of my savings account is education or buy a home, and one is Roth IRA, right? So you would that's just the name of it, okay? And in that, you pick the mutual funds that you want to put the money in, or a money market or whatever, okay? So he did it all himself. Why am I telling you this? You can do this, okay? You can do this, so keep that in mind. All right, where else? Where else can we go? What if I max out? You can put up to $6,000 per year in a Roth IRA or traditional. You actually have until April 15th for the previous year. So for 2020, you actually have until April 15th of 2021 to max out the 6,000. So don't feel like you have to put it all in at once. If you have it all now, just do it and start working on 2021. Okay, so what is that? $500 a month would give you 6,000 a year, and it goes up by about $500 every couple of years. So how much you could put in. Okay, so but start now. That's my point. Your fiduciary will walk you through the steps. I promise you. Okay. What else can you put money in? You can put money into a single or solo 401k, or it's also called a single K. Okay, so that's basically like a 401k. It is a 401k. It's a slightly different name because you are an independent contractor. So since you're a contractor, this would be what it's called. So once you've maxed out your Roth, you can invest another $17,500 per year into this single K. It's just like a Roth or traditional style. All right. There's one catch, and that is that you can't have an employee that's worked for you for longer than a year that's making $1,000 or more. If you have an employee that's worked for you for over a year, that you would actually have to match their single K plan. Okay, since most of us work with students, though, it's not something we have to worry about. But if you have somebody who's not in school and they're full time, especially, but even 25 hours, I think it's 25 hours a week or more, then you'd have to match their plan after the first year. So not till their second year. Okay, so another option, if you don't want to do that, would be a SEP, or a simplified employee pension plan. This is, companies used to have pension plans. Well, you can have your own pension plan for yourself. And a SEP is a pre-tax investment. Okay, so in other words, you're still paying taxes on it now, but you can invest 19% of your profit or 25% of your salary if you're incorporated. In other words, you could invest up to $51,000 if you're incorporated, but you'd have to report, or even if you're not, but you'd have to report like 400K in profit to be at $51,000 and max this out. Okay. Bottom line is that don't worry about the percentages and the points. Let's say I've got $10,000. I'm going to put 6 in my Roth, and I'm going to put the other 4 in a SEP. That's really all you need to know. Okay. And that's going to benefit you financially in the future, and that's going to benefit you in retirement. Now, the catch with the SEP is if you had an employee for 3 years, the third year you'd have to contribute to their SEP. But I think most of us don't have that, so you probably don't even have to worry about that. All right, what else? What if I couldn't do either of those? Or what if I maxed out both of those? Or what if I want something a little bit more liquid that I could get if I wanted to, even though I have my emergency funds all taken care of? Well, you could just straight up invest in the mutual funds. And that's that compounding interest that I talked about, that snowball effect that happens when your earnings generate even more earnings, okay? So we talked about that a little bit. So that's the next step. By the way, for those of you that are a little bit more experienced and have all this, I want to give you a tip that you can use. Maybe somebody could post this in the chat for me. How do I know if my mutual funds, if I'm paying too much for my mutual funds? How do I know? You can go to a website called personalfund.com, personalfund, personalfund.com, and you can plug in the ticker symbol for your mutual funds. You can find that on any of your financial statements, and you can see if you're paying more than you should be. They'll compare yours to other similar mutual funds, and you'll see the loads and the fees and so on and so forth. A lot of mutual funds have hidden fees. When my grandfather was at the point where we had to unload all his stocks and move it over to something safer because he was at that point in his late 80s, my father and I hopped on with his financial advisor, and we started asking him about the funds. I had already looked them all up on personalfund.com. And I said, well, we want to take him out. He was trying to convince us not to take the money out. And I said, you have all these hidden fees. We just don't want to pay that anymore. He's like, we don't have any hidden fees. I had to show him. He didn't even know. So it's not even the financial advisor's fault, by the way. They a lot of times they don't even know. Okay. So that's why let the buyer beware, right? You have to do your own research. Okay. Where else? All right. So this is a little bit more advanced, but I think you're ready for it. A dividend yielding whole life policy. So people say, oh, don't do whole life insurance because you're going to pay into that your whole life, right? That's true. And most whole life insurance policies are not very well written. But if you specifically ask for they're all different kinds, but if you specifically ask for a dividend yielding whole life policy, what that means is that you're pretty much, and I say pretty much because who knows, but anyway, you're pretty much guaranteed a certain percentage. So for example, most of them are 4 to 5%. And you're going to be guaranteed to make that. It's not as risky as the stock market, and it's a way to allow your money to grow. There's a great book called Bank on Yourself. Many of your DVMs utilize this whole life type of whole life insurance policy. Okay, it's a dividend yielding whole life insurance policy. You can't touch it until you're ready to retire. By the way, Roth IRAs you can't touch until you're 59 and a half. Dividend yielding whole life insurance policies until you're like 65. Doesn't matter if you know all the terminology, but these are sources that you could write down and look up later when you're ready. Okay. And we'll make sure we'll get this PowerPoint up for you as well so that you can get a hold of it. All right. You don't have to do the whole life insurance policy, but if you wanted to put $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year into something like that, that would probably yield an extra, depending on how much you put in, it could yield an extra $30,000 in annual income for you in retirement, maybe more depending on when you start. Okay. So that's why people do it. All right. So just kind of having this guaranteed income they know they're going to be able to have later on. There are some other cool things you could do with it. Like you could borrow against it and pay yourself back instead of your bank. There's interest involved. So you're not really just paying yourself back. You're paying yourself back plus interest. But there are things like that you could do with a dividend yielding whole life policy. I can talk to them more about it if you want. We can set up a call. I'm willing to do that with anybody. Reach out to me on social media. Last one I've got for you here on this particular slide is individual stocks. Now, I know I said there's virtually no risk in the stock market, right? So mutual funds are the safest way to go. And having a fiduciary help you navigate those waters would be the safest, smartest thing to do. But let's say you wanted to put some money and you wanted to pick out some individual stocks because you think it's fun or it's exciting or it would just fire you up to be able to have a little more control like that. I'm okay with that. But what I always advise people, and everybody has different tolerance levels, but for me, I say, hey, if you want to take 10% of everything you have invested and you want to play with that money and pick out individual stocks yourself, that's fine. I wouldn't do more than 10% of your investments in individual stocks. Okay. Now, there are some people who have a thicker stomach line than I do and would say that number is maybe 20% or whatever, but I don't even I go to Vegas and I could care less if I gamble or not. Okay. I go to Atlantic City and if my friends are sitting at the table, okay, I'll sit down for a while, but I really could take it or leave it. So I like the 10% number. I do that. I play around with it. My kids all have individual stocks that I've gifted them when they turned 15. I did this for my nephew and my kids. And so they could kind of see how it works. And I let them pick the stock. And when Jack, this first year he did this, he picked Radio Shack, which went bankrupt that year. So he saw there is actual risk when you pick individual stocks. You could lose it all, right? We didn't have much money in it, by the way, but even still, he got to learn that lesson. And then he picked Hot Topics or something like that ended up doing really well, actually. My nephew picked Activision Blizzard. He's more than doubled his money in the past few years. We had it in something else, and he switched it over. And so it's been fun to kind of teach these lessons to them. And I like playing around with it as well, but I call that my play money. Like if I lost all that, it would have zero effect on my retirement. Okay. So that's my thoughts there. Okay. Again, I cover all this in chapters 8 and 9 of Deciding to Thrive. So just a quick, one more plug, last plug, I promise. Let's talk about buying a home. All right, John, I've got this stuff covered. I really want to get a home. All right. Why invest in a home? I got a few reasons for you here, okay? You can get some big profits from real estate. Buy a home because you can't get rich renting. The average renter has less than $5,000 saved. The average homeowner, it's closer to $80,000. So there is a difference right off the bat there, okay? Let's take, I don't know, maybe you're ready for a $200,000 home, right? So a $200,000 home, usually you would put 20% down. That's pretty important. So you know you got to save $40,000 to do that. You can buy a home and put less down. It's a little riskier, and because it's riskier, you're going to have to pay higher interest rate, usually an extra percentage in interest on that home over the lifetime of the mortgage, which can be very costly. All right. But if you put down 20%, you do not have to have that extra interest rate penalty called PMI. All right. I forget what PMI stands for, but you can look up PMI. Anyway, 40. So you put down 40. After 10 years, the average home increases by 6% a year. Now that fluctuates. You know, we had a housing bubble burst where that certainly wasn't true. But we also are currently in a housing boom where that's also not true. It's raising it higher than 6% per year right now as we sit here on this Zoom, okay? But let's use 6% because that's the national historic average. Well, your $200,000 home in 10 years is now a $358,000 home. So that means that your profits on $40,000 are $118,000. You can't get that in many places guaranteed. And technically it's not guaranteed in the housing market, but it's pretty steady, pretty safe, and you're still going to have the home no matter what until you sell it. My first home was a $300,000 home. We put down the $60,000, all right? And we sold it 7 years later for $530,000, almost exactly like this scenario. So my $60,000 in 7 years, because it went up higher, netted us $177,000. Then with that $537,000, we bought a bigger, better $650,000 home, right? So you could see over time how that would get into some $1 million properties. You don't have to start with the $1 million home that you want. By the way, we sold that bigger, better home and downsized a little bit because we didn't actually like living that way. I felt like we had to keep up with the Joneses. We had a small driveway. We asked the neighbors, how much are you paying the neighborhood kids to shovel the driveway? They said $75. So we paid $75. And I'm like, this just seems ridiculous. Then the kid comes over with a snowplow and does it in like 6 seconds because my driveway was short, you know, and I'm like, this is insane. We're not doing this anymore. So we downsized, pocketed a lot of dough. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Pretty exciting opportunities though that you have in your future there. I want to teach you how to save $100,000 in your next home. Anybody interested in that? All right. All you have to do is get a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. That's it. It'll save you $100,000. Why? Why? Here's why. Your $200,000 home costs an extra $100,000 when you're paying for it in 30 years. And the only difference is that in 30 years, your payments would be $940 per year. But if you just did it in 15 years, you'd have to pay more. You'd have to pay an extra $410 a month, $1,330 per month instead of $940. You can see right off the top why people would rather spend $400 less per month on their mortgage. I totally get it. But look at what happens in interest. Look at the light blue here is the interest that you paid. So your $200,000 home, that's the same home, right? But if you paid it off in 15 years, you paid that much interest on it. But if you pay it off in 30 years, you're paying that much interest on it. That's over $100,000 more in interest for the exact same property. For the exact same property. That's no bueno. Okay, don't do that. Let's not do that. Okay. So, by the way, people say, "Oh, I'll just get the 30-year mortgage, but I'll pay it off in 15." Yeah, and then life happens, and they don't pay it off in 15. How about, you know how long it takes to pay off a 15-year mortgage guaranteed? 15 years. And if you pay a little extra per month, you can pay it off faster. You could pay it off in 13 years. Think about that, sitting on what would then be probably a $370,000 home, or actually probably closer to, maybe you would have doubled it by then. Who knows? After 20 years or 15 years, and you'd be free. You'd be free, mortgage free. You know how much money you could save if you didn't have rent or mortgage to worry about? That's pretty cool. Some of you are living at home, and that is your scenario. That's pretty cool. All right, that's pretty cool. But you got to buy a house if you want to be wealthy, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Okay, not everybody feels that way. I do have a friend who has 27 properties and lives in an apartment. because he doesn't want to have to take care of all these properties. He's got a property manager. He's got 3 restaurants. So his philosophy is, I just don't want to mess with it. I want to be able to move around when I want to. And that's just how he lives his life. Okay. I like walking out into my lawn personally and having a hot tub. All right. I'll let that sit there for a minute. Let that sit there. Real estate. If I had my 20s to do all over again, I'd probably buy a duplex, live in one half and rent out the other half, and have the renters pay the whole mortgage. Now, I didn't even know about this stuff minutes here, but I wish I had my 20s over again. Nobody taught me about money, and anybody who was teaching me, I wasn't listening. And even if they talked about it at SLC, that's probably when I left the room for a little while to get a break. Okay. I wasn't into it. I wasn't into it. Once I started a serious relationship and thinking about my future, I started to get into it. You can see how that might happen. Okay. I would have bought that home near a college and rented it out, or I have bought a home near a college and rented it out. That was a pretty good way to do it. If you're really ready to take a plunge with investing in real estate, start with a 5 to 8 unit property. And the reason why you want 5 to 8 units, it'd be obviously more money wise. However, if one goes unrented, even if 2 go unrented, you're still covering the mortgage, right? So, but if you have it fully rented, you're probably making a pretty good profit. It's just a great way to hedge your bets. Now, I don't have time to dive into this right now, but if you want, there's a great book called The ABCs of Real Estate Investing. It's actually a Rich Dad Poor Dad book. The ABCs of Real Estate Investing by Ken McElroy. That's very good. And I'm going to give you one more book recommendation. I don't know if somebody's popping these in the chat for us here, but it's called Set for Life by Scott Trench. Set for Life by Scott Trench. I recommend that book to a lot of 20-somethings because he'll really walk you through a different program to build wealth in your 20s so that you're set up for your 50s, okay? That I think is pretty cool. But anyway, those are 2 fun reads, audiobooks, however you want to do it. There are also some tax advantages for owning real estate that I don't have time to get into, but that's something that also helps. You don't have those tax advantages when you're a renter, but you certainly do have them when you're a homeowner that you want to be thinking about as well, okay? All right, I'm not sure how we're doing on time at this point, but let me come up for air. And I'm out of time. Okay. I have 2 bonus slides I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm going to pull Drew Frank here. This is a handout that I gave the Trent Booth. It's in the handouts folder. It talks about what insurances should I have. Okay. And I walk through all the insurances that you should have for yourself. Okay. Including disability, which is probably the most important insurance that you should have to protect yourself and your future. Okay. In case something happens to you. And then the other slide I have for you, I will send this to Trent and he'll pop it in there for you, but it's to incorporate or not. A lot of times I get questions on, should I incorporate or should I not incorporate it? Should I be an LLC? Should I be an S Corp? On one page, I answer all those questions. I got these answers with a little help from Adam Stock and Rising Stock Inc., by the way. They have some great upcoming wealth building workshops once a month starting Tuesday, the 13th of October, I believe. And then once a month they're having these. So find out about those wealth building workshops. And I just want to end with one last thought as I close it out. 2 thoughts, actually. One is give. When you're building wealth, one of the greatest things you can do is be a giver. And we love to give financially when we can, where we can, and we do that often. And I think that's an important part of the lifestyle that we've chosen to lead, and we have the means to do it. You can start by giving blood if you don't have money right now. There are other things that you can give. You can give your time, but find a way to be a giver. And the last thing is dream big. Victor Hugo said there's nothing like a dream to create the future. Gang, Vector is the vehicle to achieve whatever we want in life. Every single person on this Zoom has the opportunity to launch their life by what they do in our business. What we learn as district managers, it's unbelievable. My goal is to have an organization that helps people learn and grow as much as possible. Isn't that your goal too? And I want you to be rich. I want you to be rich. The decision happens in a moment. Every moment we're deciding between weak thoughts and strong thoughts. Sometimes we have to shove the weak thoughts out and fill our brain with strong thoughts. We attract what we focus on. If we decide to make good choices in the moment, how powerful is this team going to be? How powerful is your life going to be as you make these decisions? Thank you for your time, everyone. It was a real pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is John Wasserman. How about it? Let's give him some jazz hands there. In fact, I'll invite you to do the same thing. 1 to 2 words describing how you feel right now after John Wasserman's masterclass on finances. And again, we could probably go another 2 hours here, and I think John could still be able to keep going and just crushing it. I'm seeing words like relieved. And John Wasserman, I just appreciate so much you being able to hit all wide range of where people are at right now. There's sometimes shame that people are feeling when it comes to finances. What I love is that you bring high-level stuff while at the same time giving people permission to be where they're at right now. And I'm just so encouraged by the message that you've given today, and I know it's helped a ton of people. So here's what I'm going to invite people to do. We're going to take a break again. We're going to take 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back. We're probably going to need to kick my second masterclass to another date, and that's fine. I regret nothing. I actually wish we had more time for John, especially for the Q&A. Although, let me say this. You probably got this from